In January 2026, a quiet event took place that may one day be remembered as the beginning of a new financial era. There were no emergency broadcasts, no dramatic speeches from Washington, and no alarms ringing on Wall Street. Yet something extraordinary happened. A coalition of nations, spanning Asia, Africa, Europe, and South America, activated a brand new system for global trade, one that no longer depends on the US dollar. For the first time in nearly a century, a functioning alternative to the dollar-based order is live, not theoretical, not experimental, fully operational. These countries can now move massive volumes of trade without routing a single transaction through American currency. For your entire lifetime, the dollar has been the backbone of international commerce, the invisible gatekeeper for energy, food, technology, and raw materials. It was the only road that mattered. That reality just changed. What's remarkable is how it happened. There was no direct attack on the old system. Instead, a new one was built alongside it. New rails, new rules, new leverage. Nearly half of the world's population now has access to a parallel financial universe. This isn't the collapse of the old order overnight. It's something more profound, the end of a monopoly. And once a monopoly breaks, the world never returns to what it was before. What makes this new framework so powerful isn't just that it exists, it's how carefully it was designed. Every nation asks the same two questions before trusting money. Will it hold its value, and will it stay out of someone else's control? The architects of this system built it to answer both. Part of its value is anchored to something humanity has trusted for thousands of years: physical gold. Not paper claims, not digital certificates, actual metal stored in secured vaults across participating countries. This foundation sends a clear message. This system is grounded in something tangible, something that exists beyond politics and promises. The rest of its value comes from a blend of the member nations' own currencies, reflecting their combined economic strength: factories, energy reserves, consumer markets, and growth potential. It's a declaration that their collective momentum is powerful enough to support a global trade network. The design is deliberate. Gold provides stability and gravity. The currency basket provides motion and growth. Together, they form a system meant to be trusted in crisis and flexible in expansion. This isn't just a new way to pay. It's a declaration of independence, proof that nations no longer need to borrow someone else's infrastructure just to participate in the world economy. This shift didn't begin with ambition. It began with fear. In early 2022, the world witnessed something unprecedented in modern finance. Hundreds of billions of dollars belonging to a major nation were frozen overnight. Wealth accumulated over decades became unreachable with the stroke of a pen. It wasn't lost in war. It wasn't destroyed by collapse. It was simply switched off. For governments watching from the sidelines, the message was unmistakable. Money stored inside someone else's system isn't truly yours. It's conditional, political, vulnerable. Leaders across Asia, the Middle East, and the Global South realized their national savings could vanish if they ever crossed the wrong line. Economic planning suddenly became inseparable from national security. What had once been quiet diplomatic conversations turned into urgent strategy sessions. This new system wasn't built to provoke the West. It was built as insurance, a financial lifeboat, a parallel route that can't be blocked by another country's laws or priorities. Control of money is control of destiny, and once nations understood that their trade, reserves, and survival depended on infrastructure they didn't own, independence became non-negotiable. The launch wasn't symbolic. It was necessary. This wasn't rebellion. It was self-preservation. Skeptics naturally ask whether this can really work in the real world. The answer is already playing out at massive scale. Two of the world's largest economies now conduct the vast majority of their trade without the US dollar. Energy, machinery, food, technology, hundreds of billions in commerce move directly between them using their own currencies. No dollar conversion, no intermediary, no permission required. This isn't a future promise, it's happening right now. What began as a survival tactic under pressure became a blueprint for independence. Sanctions forced innovation. Temporary workarounds hardened into permanent systems. Over time, those systems proved something once considered impossible. Global trade does not collapse without the dollar at its center. Think of it like transportation. For decades, there was only one highway, and everyone paid the same toll. These nations began carving narrow side roads through difficult terrain. Now, those paths have been paved into a modern superhighway, and it's open to others. This matters because it shatters a myth. The world was told there was no alternative. Now there is proof. And once countries realize they have a choice, the conversation changes. It stops being about whether a new path exists. It becomes about how long they can afford to stay on the old one. What transforms this from an interesting experiment into a true turning point is scale. This is not a fringe group of small economies testing a theory. The alliance now represents nearly half of humanity. Billions of people live in nations that can immediately use this system for real commerce. That means it launches with instant relevance and built-in demand. Energy from one region, food from another, technology from another, all can now move through this parallel network without ever touching the old financial core. The combined economic weight behind this system is immense. Trillions in annual output, control over critical resources, massive manufacturing capacity, expanding consumer markets. This gives the framework gravity. It isn't asking the world to believe in a future that might exist someday. It arrives already embedded in everyday trade flows. That's what changes the psychology. Other nations no longer see a concept, they see a working ecosystem. They see ships docking, pipelines flowing, factories producing, and payments settling through a different channel. And once something proves it can operate at scale, it stops being an alternative and starts becoming an option. History shows that power follows infrastructure. Whoever builds the roads decides who moves, who waits, and who pays. By building new financial roads, these nations have altered the map of global commerce. The world no longer has a single center of gravity. It has a second one. This shift doesn't only affect geopolitics. It reaches directly into markets people already touch, especially gold. Because a significant portion of this system is anchored to physical metal, every expansion creates structural demand. The more transactions it handles, the more reserves it requires. The more nations that join, the more gold must be secured. The same countries building this framework are already the world's largest buyers and producers of gold. For years, they have been quietly accumulating it. Now that accumulation has a new purpose. It isn't just a hedge, it's a foundation. This dynamic creates a powerful feedback loop. As adoption grows, demand for gold rises. As gold becomes more central, confidence in the system increases. And as confidence increases, more participants are drawn in. Supply, however, remains finite. Gold cannot be printed. It must be mined, refined, and stored. When a growing monetary structure depends on a limited physical resource, price pressure becomes inevitable. This is why major institutions now project dramatic shifts in gold's value, not because of speculation, but because of structural demand. This new system doesn't merely coexist with gold, it is partially built on it. Every unit in circulation represents metal locked away. In that sense, this isn't just a new currency framework, it is a redefinition of what gives money weight in the modern world. To understand the deeper implications, you have to grasp a concept most people never hear about, even though they benefit from it every day. Economists call it the exorbitant privilege. Because the dollar sits at the center of global trade and reserves, the United States enjoys advantages no other nation possesses. It can borrow more cheaply than anyone else because the world constantly needs dollar-based assets. It can import far more than it exports because other countries must earn dollars to function in global commerce. And it can wield access to its financial system as a geopolitical weapon through sanctions and exclusions. This new framework doesn't destroy that system overnight. It places it on a clock. For the first time in modern history, there is a credible, large-scale alternative that major economies can actually use. Where there was once monopoly, there is now choice. Every time a country settles even a fraction of its trade outside the dollar, global demand for dollars softens. Each shift is small on its own. Together, they become erosion. This isn't a sudden crash, it's a slow recalibration of power. The dollar's dominance doesn't vanish, it thins. And once that thinning begins, it's difficult to reverse because alternatives become self-reinforcing. The United States isn't facing collapse. It's facing the gradual loss of an advantage it has relied on for generations. The future doesn't belong to a single currency anymore. It belongs to a system where influence must be earned, not assumed. Perhaps the most consequential impact lies with countries that aren't part of this system yet, but are watching closely. Many developing economies are trapped in a cycle of dollar-denominated debt. Their local currencies weaken while their obligations remain expensive. At the same time, they are often caught between competing pressures from global powers. For these nations, this new framework isn't about ideology. It's about leverage. It offers diversification. It offers options. It offers a way to trade with major partners without being completely exposed to dollar volatility or foreign policy decisions made elsewhere.
Leverage.
It represents a potential escape route when pressure mounts. Every time one of these countries feels the weight of dollar debt, every time sanctions threaten their economy, every time monetary policy abroad ripples through their markets, this alternative becomes more appealing. That's how monetary change becomes geopolitical change. Influence shifts not through speeches, but through settlement systems. This framework acts like gravity. It doesn't force alignment, it attracts it. Slowly, pragmatically, irresistibly. The world won't flip overnight, but it will begin to organize around multiple centers of financial power. And once nations realize they have somewhere else to turn, the balance of negotiation changes forever. For this system to grow beyond a bold beginning, it must overcome its greatest challenge: unity. Sustaining a shared financial framework demands trust, coordination, and long-term commitment, qualities that are difficult even among allies. The nations behind this project are not natural partners. Many have clashing interests, competing ambitions, and unresolved tensions. Some have faced each other across borders. Others differ sharply in political values and economic priorities. Managing a common monetary structure requires restraint. It asks powerful states to surrender pieces of sovereignty. It demands compromise during crises. It forces cooperation when domestic pressure pushes in the opposite direction. These are not small sacrifices. History offers warnings. Even regions with shared culture and institutions have struggled to maintain monetary unions. Crises expose fault lines. Recessions test solidarity. Disagreements over policy can fracture trust. The challenge here is even greater because these nations are diverse in language, ideology, and strategic outlook. The greatest threat to this system may not come from outside pressure. It may come from within. Disagreement, drift, the slow erosion of alignment. Observers betting against this framework often point here. They assume contradiction will defeat cohesion, that rivalry will outweigh cooperation, that ambition will outrun patience. Whether that assumption proves correct will determine whether this project becomes a chapter or an era. There is, however, a counterweight stronger than rivalry: shared vulnerability. Despite their differences, these nations possess a powerful common motivation. They all understand what it means to be exposed within a system they do not control. They all watched what happens when access can be revoked. They all learned that economic dependence can become strategic weakness. That awareness reshapes priorities. It reframes cooperation not as idealism, but as security. The drive to reduce dependence on an external financial core is no longer theoretical. It is grounded in experience. Opposition can unify, so can risk. When the cost of fragmentation feels higher than the cost of compromise, alignment becomes rational. This system does not require friendship. It requires necessity. That necessity may be strong enough to overcome friction. Not permanently, not perfectly, but long enough to build momentum. And momentum changes outcomes. As participation grows, the benefits compound. As benefits compound, departure becomes expensive. In that way, the system protects itself, not through ideology, but through utility. It becomes easier to stay than to leave. And that is how structures endure. This project doesn't need harmony. It needs purpose, and that purpose is clear. Never again be trapped inside someone else's switch. This moment does not mark the death of the dollar. It marks the end of something more subtle: exclusivity. For decades, there was only one true option for global settlement. Now there is more than one. That alone transforms the landscape. What follows will not be collapse. It will be evolution. The world will not split cleanly into opposing camps overnight. Instead, it will grow more complex, more layered, more plural. Countries will use different systems for different needs. Some trade will flow through old channels, some through new ones. Influence will no longer move in straight lines. The true victory of this framework is not replacement, it is existence. It proves that alternatives are possible, and once possibility becomes reality, leverage redistributes. Nations gain negotiating power. Threats lose certainty. Dependency becomes optional. The global economy shifts from a single axis to a network of centers. The rules that governed finance for generations are being rewritten in real time, not in theory, in practice. Whether you are an investor, a business owner, or simply someone trying to protect your savings, this shift is no longer abstract. The era of unchallenged dominance is over. What replaces it is still forming, but one thing is certain: the world will not return to the simplicity of one currency, one road, one gatekeeper. The future belongs to those who understand that change before it becomes obvious. This isn't just a story about governments, currencies, or distant power struggles. It's about the ground shifting beneath the system that shapes your savings, your investments, your job, and your future. The rules that govern global money for your entire lifetime are being rewritten in real time. You don't have to be a trader, an economist, or a policymaker to feel the impact. Every major shift in financial history eventually reaches ordinary people through inflation, interest rates, asset values, and opportunity itself. For decades, the world ran on a single assumption: there was only one center of gravity. Now, that certainty is gone. A parallel system exists. Choice exists. Competition exists. And when money systems change, the winners are never those who ignore it. They are the ones who notice early, who learn, who adapt before the headlines become unavoidable. This moment is an invitation to pay attention, to ask better questions about how value is stored, how power moves, and where the world is heading. The future will not look like the past, and pretending otherwise is the most expensive mistake anyone can make. You don't need to predict everything. You only need to understand that something fundamental has shifted. Awareness is leverage. Knowledge is protection. And in a world where the financial map is being redrawn, the greatest risk is standing still while everything else moves.